All right, everyone. Hello, welcome. We are going to get started here in just a moment. But welcome. You are at the Power of Storytelling panel, and we're very excited to have you. Yay! So my name is Raederle Sterling, and I'm going to be the moderator today, which means I will try to gives as much space for all of these amazing panelists to talk. So I will leave time and space open for questions or sharing closer to the end. Probably last 20 minutes or so, or it kind of depends on how the flow goes with how it's going up here. But you can see around the room on chairs, maybe under some chairs, there are pieces of paper with colors and shapes on them. If you have a question, when we get there, hold it up, and I'll try to use those to call on people as we go around. But yeah, that's what I got. So anyone want anything we need to clear up before we even just kind of jump in?
I think so.
All right. Yay! Okay. So again, my name is Raederle Sterling. I'm a high school English and theater teacher here in Minneapolis, and so I know something about stories and storytelling and the power of stories as they relate to teenagers. But I'm the teacher and these are the doers. So we will start on this end, I guess, and just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and maybe just a short little anecdote or impression about why you feel like stories or storytelling is powerful or important.
Okay, does this work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, hi everybody, my name is Faith. I write as FD Lee. I write science fiction and fantasy books. I'm down in the dealer's room if you want to come and say howdy doody. Why do I think stories are important? I think stories are important as just a consumer of stories and narratives, but also I did a PhD on the representation of women in high fantasy and how fiction creates and molds our beliefs and our belief systems. So as a fan of storytelling, I have opinions, but I suppose also as a doctor, it sounds weird, doesn't it? As a doctor of storytelling, I have opinions, so that's probably why I'm here. Thank you.
I write as Kate Dane. I have 2 self-published novels, a collection of spec fic, and a werewolf romance. The reason that I believe in stories, I've always thought stories made a difference to people, but now there are actually scientific evidence says that people who read have more empathy. This is true not only for nonfiction, but also for fiction. So the nice thing is that the next time you pick up the book and somebody says, why are you reading that? You can say, because I am becoming a more empathic, better person.
That's wonderful. My name is Brigitte Bako. I am a guest of honor at this wonderful CONvergence. It's my first one. I was a voice actor on Gargoyles and had You were here the first night, you know that I turned down Prince, but that's not the story. But I was an actress for many, many, many years. Well, to get into that, I was an actress for many years, from the age of 19 to probably 38. That's what I did primarily. And I came up in the 90s as a sexy young actress, so I was naked on page 4 no matter what, and I did a lot of bad movies and so-so movies, and I thought I could do better. I had never really written anything but a term paper, but I wrote good term papers. And my mother said, Brigitte, you're a writer, you could do it. And one day I was on an HBO show, it was called Mind of the Married Man, and I was bored out of my mind. And I thought, I can do this, I can do better than this. And I sat down and I wrote a pilot. I had the benefit of having read 1 million scripts in a 20-something year career, good ones, bad ones. And I took a shot, because that's all it takes, is sitting down and actually trying. And the reason I love storytelling, because I write comedy. And the trick to comedy is you take the shittiest things that have ever happened to you, mix a little, alchemy magic in time, and if you're lucky, you get a comedy. So for me, it's life-changing. Because I've taken the worst things, or what I thought were the worst things in my life, the craziest stories, and they become my funniest stories, my award-winning stories. So I think storytelling is so powerful.
Well, once again, I found myself in the position of being the least qualified person on the panel. I'm John Shea. My qualifications for being here, I've written about 10 screenplays. A couple of them got optioned, spent a little time in development hell, and never got made. And written some short stories, officially finished the first novel, which I've done nothing with so far, other than think of the next novel. And I give a lot of credit to the sort of the power of myth kind of idea of writing that you'd get from Joseph Conrad or from Carl Jung, and I kind of absorbed that and internalized it in my approach to writing, and so I feel like it's pretty easy to say that writing can be powerful as a result of those types of concepts, that they hone in on things that we inherently grow up receiving of and accepting as reality anyhow.
Awesome, yay. I'm so excited to be here. So I guess I have questions about kind of, as we look at this questions that are given in the panel, what do we learn from characters making gut-wrenching decisions? How do we take this from media to real life? I kind of want to get into like that crafting a little bit, because as a teacher, I teach the craft of writing, or I try to. So thinking about maybe taking this in one of two ways. When you are crafting a story, how much of it is intentional thought of audience impact? How much of it is just random mushrooms that grow? And how much of it is thinking about, what's important to you or the message you want to get across? So what kind of mix of alchemy, as you kind of were saying? We can go in any direction, shape, or form we want to on that one. So I guess your process, how does it go when you're writing?
Story is about a moment of change. And a bigger story, like a novel, is usually about moments of change where you see a character making decisions that perhaps don't go well over and over again until they change and they get a better outcome. Or if it's a tragedy, at the end they make the wrong decision and they get a bad outcome. So that could sort of be a simple explanation of what it is. But a lot of it is what speaks to you about the story that you're writing. And I think that probably is different for every writer, every creator, and possibly for every book or every property that people create. So for me personally, it tends to be a moment that I think, this is the situation I want on the page. And I will write an entire story or an entire novel to get that moment on the page. So one of the earlier non-spec fiction stories that I wrote was a novel about a single mother whose child is lost from church in a blizzard on Christmas Eve. And everyone tells her the child is dead. And what would you do if you were that person? Then how would you feel about your faith, which had been very strong to that point? So that was the moment I wanted. And so for me, that's usually what stories are about, that crucible moment that the character has to find an answer to something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's the adage, isn't there, is that story is character plus conflict. Intentional thought. I'm not sure anything I ever do is intentional as such. I think I spend a lot of time crafting characters. I was on a panel earlier this week about character and world creation, and I was moderating that, so that was fun. But I spend a lot of time making the characters, and I have some friends who work in mental health, so we always have this fun game where they analyze my characters so that I can find out what actually is wrong with them, and then I can learn about that thing. So I think the intentional thought is very much there with the character creation, and I do spend probably too much time in that area. But then once I know who the characters are, everything then is just completely out of my control. They get plopped into the world and they interact with the people, and whatever they do then I guess is what they do. But I think, like Kate was saying in the introductions about experiential learning, I think as a reader, if the character is as real as possible and as three-dimensional as possible, then that for me is what makes it a great story. I don't really care what the genre is, it's just like, oh, I like this character, or I hate this character, but the character is real. And that's me. I'll then follow through until the end of the book or the movie or the audio or whatever it is.
I have zero technique. So I have, I don't know, sometimes I think it's a gift and sometimes I think it'll go away because I really don't do what other writers do. At least I'm a script writer and I write specifically half-hour cable, no commercials, so very specific. I don't love features, that third act is a bitch. So, and I write about myself, so all the time, because I'm vain. So I specialize in the over 40 vagina, and that's not for everybody, but that's what I write about. And my stories can start with, I'll hear a joke, which I'll probably steal from someone, because writers steal. I heard a joke where it wasn't a joke, it was a story where somebody said they went to visit their friend who they hadn't seen, they were estranged, the guy was in a coma, he couldn't speak anymore, he lost the use of, his verbal speech and everything, and he went to visit this friend, and the friend seemed like he was trying to speak, and he was like, what is it, and he went, yeah, and then he spit out, you've put on weight. And I built an entire story about a woman that comes out of a coma to tell me I'm fat. And that's just how it can be a kernel like this. And so I usually have something that is an inciting incident in someone's life, and I usually know my beginning, and I have an idea of my end. I don't know my middle. I take a journey. As long as I write, it'll find its way. Much smarter, brighter people than me have told me, very big feature writers, because I really had no writer's block for many years, and I had some right around COVID. And this writer said, as long as you write a sentence a day, you can call yourself a writer. And I have written some of the best scripts that I've ever written by putting in a sentence a day. And then the next day it's 3 sentences or a page or whatever, but I take all the pressure off and I go on a magical mystery ride with my beginning and end, and I see what crazy shit can happen in the middle. I don't think this is how you're supposed to do it, but that's how I do it.
I mean, it's how you do it, so that's how you're supposed to do it. That's how it works, right?
Yeah.
I think there's no rule, so it's however you do it. If you feel like you're doing well at it, that's what matters. I'm a huge fan of outlines. I need to have my outlines, and I like to brainstorm different ways to resolve things within the outline, because I know that the first couple thoughts I have are going to be things that I've just taken from other resources that I've seen in other stories. Mm-hmm. And so audiences are going to read that and be like, oh, obviously this is how it's going to turn out. So if I don't brainstorm around those things, then it's going to feel meaningless for the audience to read the story, if they ever read it. But I like outlines because it keeps me from getting writer's block. Hemingway once said, you should never stop writing until you know where to start writing again. And outlines help me do that. That's what
I really want to be an outline writer. I'm so envious.
Me too. I can't do it. It bores me.
Well,
because then I know what's going to happen, and I want to not know. It's weird.
It's like discovery writing. That's what I've heard it called. Yeah. I tend to find it more get stuck, cry for 6 months, find the way out. Mm-hmm. But discovery writings are much nicer, more positive.
Mm-hmm.
So this is your process, which I love, right? And that's part of the process. So then in the process, getting into the impact then of your stories, have you, those questions about, okay, you've made this beautiful, creation, or not so beautiful creation, whatever, you've thrown it together, you've outlined it. I would love if we could, like, how does that impact you, just like when you finish something, or like that power, getting to that power of storytelling, like, how does that make you feel as a creator?
It's the greatest high in the world when it's working. There's nothing fucking better. And I've done a lot of great things in my life, but there's nothing better than that. But this is what I do. And this is what I say, at least for me, because again, comedy is specific. I say, go out and live, fuck up as much as you can, and then write it down. You can't, come on, I mean, I know some people just sit in their world and they write these amazing fantasy and son, I can't do that. I've got to live, I've got to have the experience because I write from truth. And I like really hope to have a terrible date or a terrible con or a terrible something. This one's too good. I don't have anything terrible to write about. But I like mistakes.
Sorry.
I love mistakes. I love things to go terribly wrong that in the moment seem insurmountable, because that to me is the artistry of turning it around into something positive.
Am I next?
Whoever. We'll get to questions like the last 20 minutes.
This is going to sound awkward, so please forgive me, but I feel like I don't really know whether or not I've written something that is really going to be emotionally impactful for my reader, unless I'm rereading it while I'm intoxicated. I'm actually 100% serious. Like, I'll write something, maybe I'll keep writing, I'll write a whole chapter or something like that, and then I'll go back and reread it after a glass of scotch, and I'll feel completely different about it. You know, and maybe it's because I'm a slightly different person when I'm reading it, but that has been effective for me, and hopefully it doesn't really hurt my liver too much.
That's, yeah, right drunk, edit sober, you know?
I've heard that.
Yeah, I think, I got told it once when I first started writing, and it was possibly too influential on me, but yeah, I agree completely, Brigitte, with what you were saying about lived experience. Like, lockdown for me, I was watching all of my like author friends, you know, having their lockdown book, and I couldn't do anything. We were locked down for about 2 years in the UK. I don't know if it's similar.
It was worse for you guys, I think.
Is it?
Stricter.
Well, we were Plague Island, so I mean, that makes sense, I guess. But yeah, so like however long it was, I just couldn't do anything, like, at all. And I just got into more and more of this kind of cycle of, you know, I'm watching my friends go, oh, here's my lockdown novel, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's because exactly as you were saying, like, nothing was happening.
Right.
You know, there wasn't any disasters or triumphs, or like, to me personally, I had a very quiet and gentle lockdown. I appreciate it was different for other people. And so, yeah, I think, you need to have something happening. It has to, and I think this ties back to this idea of character generation as well. It has to be something real. And I think if it's real, it probably will impact on your readers or your listeners or whoever. They know, yeah, exactly that. Like, you can tell when something is false. You know, and again, we could get into like the psychology of reading and, you know, the evolutionary, like our brains developed. It is an evolutionary advantage to have stronger imaginations. People with stronger imaginations kind of survived more way back when. But yeah, either way, people will know if it's not coming from somewhere. So I guess whether it's intentional or unintentional, like whatever your process is, if it's coming from a place of truth for you, then people will pick up on that. They may not like your book, you know, not everyone likes my stories, but I hope that they at least feel that they're coming from somewhere.
For me, the one thing that I cannot forgive in a novel is a lack of hope. People can try and fail, but they have to have hope, and they have to have a belief that they can win. So for me, part of writing a novel is getting at that, putting a person in an impossible situation and then watching them solve it. And they'll try to solve it and they'll fail, and they'll try again and they'll fail. They'll try a lot of different things, and eventually they're going to succeed. if I give them a happy ending, and I'm a softie for happy endings eventually, they call it torturing eventually. They call it torturing your characters on the way to get there. And it isn't so much that you are torturing them as that you know that this person can be strong enough to hang in there and get through it. And because they are strong, you get to throw a lot of stuff at them along the way. And if you do that, it's kind of like that story that I read as a small child with a little train. I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. Some of you apparently did not read the little story about the train. It was a small little engine that wound up pulling a very large train up a mountain because the big train engine failed. And the little train engine said, I think I can, I think I can, and pulled that train up the mountain, and it was a happy ending.
That sounds like a really cute story.
It's a marvelous children's book as far as I'm concerned. And I think there's a lot of that goes into my stories.
Beautiful. I want to read your stories.
Thank you.
Mine end with a but-um-bum. Not always helpful.
That's okay too. Like, that's what the impact in our audience, like we need different things at different times. And by the way, when I tell my students the I guess student-friendly version of Write Drunk, Edit Sober is write with abandon, edit without mercy.
I just want to say something. I take a memoir writing class because I want to write a book. I want to be you guys when I grow up. And it's a very different animal than writing half-hour scripts. And I take a class that is called Let It Bleed by a writer named Pamela DeBar. She was a very famous groupie who wrote that infamous book, I'm With the Band. And her technique is she gives us all prompts, and we have 12 minutes, and we cannot edit ourselves, we cannot think, we spit it out. And she said, within a year, you have a book. And I thought, that's not possible, because I could spend 6 months on the first paragraph, right? I'm a control freak and a perfectionist, and it's such a freeing, amazing technique, and basically spit it out, because especially if you've not started writing yet, it took me years to start. I thought about it for a long time. I did it also out of necessity, because I don't know if any of you are coming from other careers, but I was an actress and I was doing other people's bad scripts, and I thought, they're never going to let me play this, that, or the other. I'm going to have to do it for myself. So it was a tool that I used for me, to change my life, and it did.
When you think about it, and you certainly know this as you've written scripts, movies or any kind of story in general, there's really only about 50 or 60 instances within the story where the person experiences something, right? The character experiences something. And so when you break it down like that, it's really not that much content. And so it shouldn't really, theoretically, be that much work to write it all out. It ends up being more work than that. But if you think of it as an easier task, that 12-minute session, it's probably a good way to approach it.
Thank you. I'm going to shift us a little bit here, because we've been talking a lot about the process of writing and like how we think about it and what we think about. And I kind of want to get more into, I want to kind of shift into the impact on the audiences, and also like why our stories, like why do we keep craving stories? Like the same stories, we have tropes, we have stereotypes, we have archetypes, that a lot of the same stories keep getting told over and over again in new ways, we keep reinventing them. So like why do we think we do that? Like how are stories powerful that way? But then also a follow-up question I have to that is like the importance of telling those stories for people who don't always get their story told. And why is that an important and powerful thing too?
Sorry, I'm just writing.
Building on something that was said earlier about pushing our characters to the limit at some level. Essentially, it's kind of what happens at the end of the second act of the story, right? Things seem impossible. Things seem hopeless, but you drive through, the character drives through the story, and they resolve things somehow. And that's a pretty powerful moment for me. The moment where the character or the audience, the reader, finds the things that are needed to resolve the problems, the major dramatic question, comes to fruition for them. And it's pretty hard to not find that powerful if it's written well.
They say that part of the reason that people love stories is because stories help us figure things out before we're in this situation ourselves. You read a serial killer book, and what do you learn? You learn how to fight off a serial killer when the next one walks down the street and picks you as his victim. That seems odd, but I think we are drawn to, and how would I react in that situation? We have a model. We have a model for what to do and what not to do, generally in the same book. Not always, but our heads get into that, and our heads, according to neuroscience, which I am not a neuroscientist, but we can't really tell the difference between I was walking down the street and I got jumped, and the character in the book was walking down the street and got jumped. So we're constantly learning ways to manage things from stories, and if they're well done, I think that draws us in. I also like what John said about we're seeing people fight through that moment in Rocky where there's the theme song, which I hope everybody knows, where like he's going to go back in and he's going to fight and he's going to win. And maybe it doesn't quite work out that way, but we're all cheering for Rocky and we're all living that moment with Rocky. And maybe that means we go home and we try once more to write that term paper, or we try once more to get the job, or we try once more to write the novel. And to me, the impact that stories have is that they teach us there is a way to get through the impossible things. And we are strong enough to do it. And that's a magical gift.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Absolutely. The kind of experiential learning potential of stories, exactly as you say. That's exactly right. That's why, as human beings, we develop such powerful imagination. Like there's kind of like evolutionary, physiological evolution, if you like, as opposed to sociological evolution. There's kind of three key moments. One of them was thumbs, because they rock. The other one was like the flattening of our teeth from kind of our sort of ape, simian ancestors whose teeth are like this. With the flattening of our teeth, it allowed us to make more phoneme sounds, which made our communication more complex. And the development of imagination in our brains. Like those were the three key kind of physiological things that really pushed us forward. That thing, exactly as you say, experiential learning. There's also, I think, the difference between, what counts as a story and what counts as a kind of retelling of events. And the kind of thing that will make a story a story. I'm glancing down at my phone, sorry, because I've got the notes here. But the thing that will make a story, according to, I'm going to cite myself, according to Brewer and Lichtenstein, what makes a story is that it elicits an emotional response. If it doesn't elicit an emotion, it's kind of just a retelling of, I woke up this morning and I overslept. Like, shut up, Faith, that's boring. And I think that's why, sorry, I'm going back. I think that's why stories are important, right? Because we learn from them, we gain experience. There's a brilliant quote from Goschel who says, it's much safer to hear how to kill a tiger than to try an experiment with trial and error. Like, I would rather hear the story. And because, if a story is working, then it is emotional. And that imagination is being triggered that makes us humans. And that matters to people. We are social animals, we survive socially. And stories can give you that connectivity. They can give you that social experience in ways that you maybe just will never experience yourself. Like this is, again, slightly divergent, but this is why representation matters so much. Because I am always going to be a neurodivergent, cis, white, English, middle class hello, darling, you know, kind of person, right? That's going to be my lived experience, and people are going to interact with me as that representation of those things. And so to read stories by like S.A. Chakrabarty or Jairam Jeja or R.F. Kuhn or N.K. Jemisin and stuff like that, I'm going to learn things that just probably aren't open to me in any other way. I've babbled for too long. I shall zip up and let someone else speak.
Well, because I write for television, I have to deal with television executives, and TV is having, of course, its incredible heyday. Ironically, harder to get things made these days than it used to be, but a much more open mind. But I like to write about what's not represented, and I wasn't represented because I'm in my 50s, I'm not married, I don't have kids, I'm still fucking smoking, and there's no show for a woman like me. Every executive was like, well, she's a yummy mommy, and I'm like, no, she's not, if you don't have a baby, and she's not a cougar because she's not divorced, and she's just me. And there are other women that I'm representing that have never been seen on television that made these choices. In my television series, my first show, G-Spot, I had, which is, the first season is almost 15 years ago, I had a transgender, a man that transitioned to a woman and stayed married to his wife as a lesbian because I grew up with somebody in my neighborhood. That was years before Transparent. And I was lucky enough to do my first show in Canada because they're a lot more open to this stuff, but there was no way a network executive was going to allow that 15 years ago, or an unmarried woman, or this or that. They're getting better, of course, but so it's very important to me to tell authentic stories that I think representation is really important. And it doesn't, you know, what our idea of the way it has to be, fuck that shit, it don't have to be that way at all. At all. Just write what you feel, what you know, don't give a shit. Nobody, these are my business. I don't know about the book business because I'm not in that business yet. They don't know anything in Hollywood. They know nothing. They go, oh, we don't want to do any shows about this. And then one look, they didn't want to do a show, an insider show about a chef. They turned 25 fucking shows down, and then comes The Bear. So they know nothing until they see it, and their heads get blown open. So just write what you want. Don't listen to anybody telling you they're not looking for this, or they don't know.
It's exactly the same in publishing,
Is it?
sadly, yeah. But someone will come along, you, somebody else, and they will prove that X, Y, Z.
Right.
I think that novel you're talking about writing, you've got to write it because a lot of agents right now are looking for diverse authors who don't get representation.
I'm thinking of the title, Lies My Vagina Told Me. Thank you.
I look forward to reading it. So with that, I guess I love like where this is going, and that like how then what is the impact and how of stories shaping our culture and our society, our understanding of the world, right? Because our stories grow, we grow. Obviously, they're a reflection of the world we live in. They're a reflection of our society as we are, and we move ever forward with them. Though we do keep pulling back from the past too. You know, there's classics in a way, and we keep remaking classics, Disney. But like, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So, but how do stories shape our culture and society is what I have written down here in my notes. But
science fiction and speculative fiction and fantasy have always been genres where we can ask the questions that we can't ask in more serious fiction. So you can write a story like Fahrenheit 451. You can write all these books that challenged issues of the day, and that even today challenge things. You can say the unsayable, because it's not in our world, it's on a different world, it's a different planet. Those are aliens, those aren't us. Or in fantasy, it's mythological creatures. It's not the two countries, or the two populaces, or the two political parties. It's totally foreign. So you can say the forbidden, and people will look at it and they will see sometimes parallels, whether they were intentionally written by the author or not. So the literature of the imagination lets you take down the boundaries that you otherwise might face in trying to get a story read and in trying to get readers to pick up that book. That said, we also have the chance to change and build the society that we thought we wanted and poke at it and see, is that really a good thing if everybody does exactly the same thing? A Wrinkle in Time sort of asked that question a lot of years ago. And the answer was, no, this isn't really good. But we can ask those questions, we can try things out, and we can put people in different positions. So if the military doesn't want to put women in command, you can put them in command in science fiction and play it out on the page. And I think there's a lot that can be done because it isn't really our world, that as an author you can choose to make.
I think if you can tackle one really socially relevant, a socially relevant topic from the real world in the world of your story, it will really drive home the force of your story for you, and it can help the reader to become more involved in what's happening in the story because they've got some impact or they've got some opinion already pre-built in their mind. So the novel that I wrote, it's about a whole bunch of different things, but in the novel, the kingdom that they live in, the newly crowned king is bringing back the death penalty. Is one of the things that kind of happens in the story that ends up framing him as more of a bastard, you know. But there's a lot of discussion in the story about whether or not it's a good thing for the kingdom. And that same discussion happens all the time in our country. So just finding one thing that people are going to be opinionated about and expressing it in your story as a component of what the character has to deal with is probably a good way to have this impact we're discussing.
What was the question?
How do stories shape our culture and society? You can take it like from your own perspective, or even just like how, you know, how we as a human race are kind of shaped by stories.
I suppose that the beauty of being able to do this on television is a little more instant gratification. People can see themselves on television in ways they never could before. They don't have to read a whole book to go there, which, you know, the attention span of most people these days, including my own. But so it's, I'm so grateful for like what's out there, like Fleabag and all those shows that were just like, what? She's getting fucked up the ass in the first scene? I can do that too, you know? Like, and Sex and the City for me, you know, I wasn't a writer then, but that I just, for a woman, a single woman, that was so liberating those early years. I watched every episode and I just remember Samantha having just done her nails and having to go in and pull out her friend's diaphragm, and I'm like, we never had permission to do shit like that. So the fact that you can tell these very, very, very truthful stories that women completely can identify with, it's great. We're getting more and more permission, and if you don't have permission, fuck it, do it anyway.
Yeah.
Make it happen.
How do stories shape our culture and reality? So I don't want to go into like the scary mind control stuff, but there is scary mind control stuff. What I would like to do is kind of a little bit of soapboxing in terms of, I think that there is a lot of issue around, and everyone on the panel, and Brigitte especially, have drawn on this. But there is a lot of issue, I think, around the gatekeeping that exists. I can speak to publishing, but I guess it's the same, right? But there is a lot of gatekeeping in publish, and there is a kind of dichotomy between the dominant and the dominated in terms of who gets to speak. I am English, British, and we have a lot of responsibility in terms of kind of the literary centre, the European kind of literary centre, and what is classified as literature, and, you know, all of this kind of stuff. So rather than kind of agree with what everyone else has said, because I do, and I think you're all bang on, and just do it and get it done, But I think more than anything, it's really important that there is more of a kind of DIY culture coming through with literature and publishing, and like small presses and indie pubbing and self-publishing. Because, you know, rightly or wrongly, there are 5 main publishers and they will publish what sells on Tesco, or I don't know what the equivalent here would be to like Target or Walmart or what, you know, like, you get me, right?
But I do love Tesco.
Oh, it's Tesco. You guys get Tesco?
No.
They don't have it here.
Ah, Tesco.
I lived in London.
Right. Yeah, Tesco's is
And Waitrose.
Oh, Waitrose.
I
We
love
don't get
them.
Waitrose in Scotland. Anyway, sorry, diversion. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, as I say, I don't want to kind of repeat what everyone has said because I completely agree. But I think that there has to be some pushback from all of us as consumers and as buyers in a capitalist society where money matters. Because these 5 publishing houses, they are just going to always give you more of the same. And like John said just now, you know, there is this kind of drive at the moment to get more diverse voices in publishing. But it's really cynical. And they are still going to choose, I hate to say it, they are going to choose diverse voices that are palatable. Right? And they're going to choose diverse voices that are telling the stories that will sell in Tesco's. So, you know, indie pub, self-pub, if you've got a story to tell, tell it. Right? And if you want to hear stories from people that aren't going to be Tesco authors, you know, look for the self-pub stuff, look for the indie pub stuff, go down into the dealers' rooms in conventions. Like, this is not a plug, and this is going to sound cynical, but like, just get out there, because stories do shape our cultures and our realities, and if we're only seeing this small window of what we are allowed to see, then what is happening? Soapbox.
That's true. It's the same with television. You can make a movie on your phone. You can have a YouTube channel. I mean, you can do all that. And some of the greatest stuff has come out of that. I'm a little lazy. I want someone to pay me to do my shit, but you know, sometimes I think that's the way it has to be done. We should be paid, and we should be paid very well. But I don't know how it is in the book world, but it's a lot of development, as you know, in television. But yeah, people are just finding ways to do it because, like you say, the gatekeepers. I mean, these are, I don't know who blew who to be the executive of what, but they don't know anything. I just will tell you that the head of comedy for like Lorne Michaels, who has Broadway Video, and he's a genius. Saturday Night Live is heading to its 50th anniversary. His head of comedy was the most unfunny person in the world. She goes, "That's really funny, it's really funny. Do you think the character can have a cat?" I mean, that's how the fucking head of comedy would talk to writers. So you just like, did she suck his dick? Like, how did she get to be head of comedy?
Right, yeah.
It's just sort of amazing. So you have to do a lot of ignoring and pivoting, and you have to have balls of steel and be like razor focused and go, I'm not going to let this get me down, and I'm just going to go forward.
Well, I can imagine in like television, that's so true, because you are reliant on teammates, right?
Yes, it's a team sport.
Yeah.
You have to marry up in television, unfortunately. So you can have the greatest script in the world, but if you're not already a famous showrunner, and if you don't have a show every year, you're not a famous showrunner, even if you had an award-winning show 5 years ago. So you have to marry up to a very in-the-moment producer, and that producer has to be attached to a studio, and that studio has to have legs with a network. And so when you can cut out all these middlemen, and it's not easy, but when you can, that's when sometimes things like Fleabag and stuff like that kind of came out of a festival and stuff like that, where magic can happen, because there's just so many things that can get lost in translation along the way. Should have gone to law school. I don't know why I'm doing this.
I mean, there's still time.
No.
I want to open up for questions, again, from the audience. If you have a question or want to make a connection, if you could raise your piece of paper, and I will try to call on the color and shape or whatnot is on the paper. And I have a final question wrap up for everyone at the end of just what was your most powerful story that impacted you as like a consumer. So just like keep that in the back of your brain running, right? So I don't like to put you on the spot too much. But, so, questions from the audience? We got Red Star.
So, speaking of inspiration, I see we have two British ladies here.
Yep.
There's a certain British lady who's a single mom, wrote a book.
Oh, I know who
Yeah.
you're talking
The
about.
person gets the stack and reads first paragraph or whatever through each one, and comes and says, you need to publish this. I believe she's the second richest woman in England.
That's right.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Right, that famous story, she was living in her car and all that stuff.
It's not true.
Not true.
None of
Okay.
Not
it's
quite.
true.
None of it's true.
We're talking about the Queen of the Turfs, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's all mythologized. It's not true. It's not.
Which, I mean, is on the other end of the power of story, right? Like,
Yeah, no, to be
creating-
fair, like creating your own mythology is like, and fair play to, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but fair play to her, because she did create this mythology that is so, it's based in truth. Like it's not, I'm not saying she made it up whole cloth, but you know, there's more to it, right? Same with Fleabag, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, fair play to her. She did create this amazing mythology for herself, and it's a really satisfying story. Everyone loves an underdog, don't they?
Yeah. Other questions? Green Star, right here.
That's a question, and more I would like to share something that really impacted me. I don't know if you spoke on it, because I got in late, but video games have not come up. Video games as an interactive medium have a really unique way of introducing you to new concepts. Spoilers for a 23-year-old game, Silent Hill 2. I'm not married, and I'm also not a white man. Silent Hill 2 introduced me to a new... America doesn't really like... America loves death, but America does not like grief. And it's something that's very difficult to get on screen in any real way. Silent Hill 2 had a lot to say about grief, both directed inwards and directed outwards. And I feel like this being an interactive medium did a really good job at introducing to me what was at the time an almost completely foreign emotion of dealing with the death of your wife and the fact that maybe you are guilty of what could have been an assisted suicide or could have been a frustrated murder, depending on your view of it. Just like, have you learned any new emotions from a media?
Video games, I have my Dragon Age tattoo because yeah, exactly the same experience. Yeah, fabulous.
I think, yeah, being able to, I mean, how we get into stories and how we have about, we still have some time left, so if there's any other questions, but just like that immersion in the story, right? Whether it's whatever medium we are experiencing it in. It's one of my favorite things. Any other thoughts, questions from the audience, or? Yes, blue over here.
Bridget, you might want to try Tag Down Publications.
Say that again?
Tag Down Publications, you said you're looking, is your memoir just going to be a straight memoir, or is it going to have other things in it?
It's going to be a dirty, funny, dirty, straight memoir.
Okay. You might want to try Blind Eye Books then, or something else, I'm not sure.
I'd probably have to write it first. I wanted to have a sign like, this is my best-selling book that I haven't written yet. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I'm a copy editor, I like pushing my favorite.
Thank you.
And books.
All right.
Okay, I got another, no one else will go.
Okay, last one.
You read The Hunger Games?
Yes.
Yes.
So you got children fighting children.
Yeah.
Well, not exactly happy. And in the end, she's basically got PTSD, unresolved. So, I mean, it's a good book. I think high school kids read it just so you know what PTSD is. So if you have a family member, someone that has it, you learn a lot from that book.
It's true. It's actually based off a Greek myth. So it has,
Is it really?
yeah,
know
with the
that.
maze, where, oh God, I can't remember which one it is.
Daedalus and Theseus.
Thank you. Yeah, it's the labyrinth. Sorry, where they have to send the 12 children every year to get to appease the king, and they get sacrificed because of the Minotaur in the labyrinth. And then you can say it louder because I can't hear you up here.
Minotaur.
Yeah, no, Perseus.
Theseus.
Is it Theseus? Thank you. That's the name I was needing. I was like, yeah, and then on his way back in there, and yeah, and it's a lot of other myths. But yeah, so she actually, yeah, Susan Collins took it off of, took from there, and that's what created the kind of the inspiration moment for the Hunger Games, which I love.
So cool. Yeah, Hunger Games is so good, films and books.
And let's talk about like how that, I mean, I teach this to my students, right? And that impact of talking about, one of my favorite units I've had this year was a dystopia unit, because it's about power and being able to see power and how do we question power and propaganda. And that's what the unit was about, was being able to talk and look at that. And we did that through reading graphic novels of students' choice, but they all, even though there were 5 different graphic novels and 5 different books, but they all got to, we asked the same questions and then use their book to talk about like, well, how did the people in power stay in power in your book? How do the people in power use their power? How do they choose people who don't have power? And just those questions that we want our people in general society to ask. So,
Sorry, I was going to say, I've been on 2 panels with you now, and all I want is to be like auditing your classes.
Oh my God.
Seriously.
You have to be with 15 and 16-year-olds then.
That was
Sorry.
my next question.
I think the classes would be worth it. I think.
Oh, thank you.
Okay,
All right, I'm seeing some more things, Ray, so I love it. Yes, please screen.
I know none of you are like executives, and none of you obviously can see the future, but you talk about, you kind of alluded to story, and stories kind of like rebellion and going through like, independent outlets to get your story told, things like that. Do any of you have a fear that as media is continuing to consolidate and you have governments that are taking a stance and saying, okay, some of these rebellious social media outlets, TikTok, whatever, are going to be outlawed, that the ability of stories to reach people is going to be taken away?
That's such a good question.
It's terrifying. It's a good point. I hope not.
I mean, conceptually, it's terrifying, and it's not at all something you would think of as a impossibility in some dystopian future, right? I'd like to think that the ingenuity of humankind would keep that from manifesting, but who knows? I mean, there's a convicted convict running for president. But, sorry, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Literary speakeasies, really close.
I would say this on that note of just how we told stories, and we've been telling stories before there was social media, right? In our communities, and how they spread and how we talk about them. We learn more and we can consume more now, but that doesn't necessarily always make the quality of stories or the power and impact of stories better. But as kind of Faith said, like our imagination, our ingenuity as a human race is part of what makes us tick, what makes us function. So I would say that it does terrify me, that whole consolidation, like who's telling the story, who is getting their story told, and who gets to decide what we hear and what we don't. That exists, but there's also, and I know from history we've seen that over and over again, and we will continue to be able to have our stories told.
I agree.
I think this is a fascinating question. I'm going to speak now about America, not being an American, so if I get this wrong, I'm only going to apologize to everybody in the room ahead of time. But like, from what I understand over here, you're having a lot of issues at the moment with like people targeting libraries to get books. I've seen it.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. So that's awful. I don't know what to say to that, except that is awful. And I mean, obviously there's been book burnings and book bannings in the world across history. So this kind of thing of like people trying to control what you can read for all the reasons I think we've discussed on this panel. It's a really surefire way to control society, is to control what they get to read and experience. I would also, this is a weird optimism, because this goes against my kind of actual ideologies and values, but we are also living in a globalized hyper-capitalist world, which is gross in many ways, but like Amazon and Jeff Bezos and people like that, they're going to keep selling you books as long as you're paying for them. So I think, like, I don't have an answer for you, but I do feel like we're in this really weird crossroads where, like, you've got certain very bad faith actors who are attacking our culture and our arts. And I mean, in the UK, the arts are under fire so aggressively. I could talk a lot about it, but I won't. So you have this reality going on, you've got the surge of the right across Europe is happening in a really terrifying way. But then on the other side, like, I'm self-published, and I've sold, like, I'm not famous, I'm certainly not, you know, as rich as Mrs. Grossface, but, like, you know, I'm doing all right, and there's no way a publisher would have picked up my books. And I wouldn't have that without Amazon. And it's a very complicated ground, but I would repeat my refrain of use your money, use your kind of money power, buy things, read things, watch things. And, you know, particularly like for you guys in the States, if you see these people going after your local library, you know, do something about it in the same way like back home, they're going after our creative arts education. And like me and colleagues and stuff like that, you know, we're like, no, you cannot shut down these educational, you know, that's where the fight is. Sorry, brain, but I think I've done it, haven't I? I can stop talking, am I there? Yeah.
So are they doing that because of money or for some other reason?
They're doing it because they're evil. But we just had a general election and the Tories are out, so...
Congratulations, Madeline.
The only country going in the right direction.
Well, I don't know, Labour, again, another conversation.
Right.
Yeah. But it's good news, it's good news.
All right, I'm going to take these three more questions, 1, 2, 3, and then our last thing, your most impactful, like, powerful story that impacted you. So go.
So I'm curious what kind of tools you use to write. So me personally, my job, my old boss required me to write about 20 pages of lesson. I teach 20 pages of lesson plans per week per class.
Gross.
And I hit a wall every weekend, right? And so I didn't have a shift until like I went off paper pencil, I went off typing, and I just spat into my phone. I just talked into it, and I created all this for, you know, whatever was going to be skimmed by my boss. So I'm just kind of curious, are there certain tools that you use to sort of help you write faster?
No.
Sorry. I use Word. There's also a software called Plotter, Plottr, which will let you take stuff and move it around. It's primarily for fiction writers. I imagine you could use it for lesson plans. So you could put a piece here and a piece here and a piece here, and then you could say, oh no, let's put 3 over here, so you can see the shape of what you're doing. So it's an outline software. A lot of people like Scrivener for writing in. I have never tried using Scrivener, so I can't comment on it. But Plotter for an outline type of thing is magnificent.
We have a similar thing for scripts called Final Draft, and it pretty much absolutely gives you the structure. So you have action, and you have characters, and you have dialogue, and you have description, and it does it for you. It's writing for dummies. You just have to fill in the stuff. Yeah.
I just use a notebook.
Oh, good, old school. Oh, also, one thing, I do have a bit of menopause brain now, but before I didn't, I still always thought if I got a great idea at 4 o'clock in the morning, I would remember it at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you don't. So write it down. Always have a little book or your phone or something for me, something funny or something that triggers me that I forget. I don't remember, so I always have something that I can write it down.
It's a lie you tell yourself because you think you're smart.
Yeah, I think you're
And you say,
smart.
oh, I'm intelligent enough to remember this.
And I never do.
I have legit
You're like,
lost
what?
so many multi-million
Right.
books.
Yeah.
Me too. I don't even write. You had a quick question, or?
Yes,
Well,
it's for Kate. Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
No, you go.
You go.
This is a polite town.
From Minnesota.
So,
Yeah.
I can tell Kate later. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I had more of a share if you're cool.
As long as it's quick, yeah.
Okay, I've been working on this story since like 2013, and I used it for my final college project. Like, it was the project of projects.
Yeah.
And it drove me up the wall, across the ceiling, and back down again. But I found it, like, as it was developing, and with what's been happening in the world around me, like there are starting to be a lot of unintentional parallels going on here, and I'm trying to own it as best as I can, because it's going to be futuristic, but not some distant future, and it's going to have to do with like political oppression, religious persecution, and even America's first empire that reaches across the solar system, where we have colonies on moons and planets already. And
Cool.
Sounds like next week.
Yeah.
It sounds very current.
Like you said.
right? And I was like trying my best to just for it to be its own thing. Like I want it to be so complicated and have so many twists and turns that nothing is going to be what it seems.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm hoping to turn it into a graphic novel.
Cool.
Sounds great.
So it
Good for you.
is 6 o'clock, so I want to just respect our time with that. So if you want to share a powerful thing that like impacted you, story that impacted you, go ahead. If you want to just go, I appreciate that, but thank you.
I can't choose one, which I think was the original, like the most, but I very recently read Babel by R.F. Kuhn. And it is, it's one of those books I was haunted. The language, the story, just phenomenal. Babel.
Okay.
So many good books out there. Recently I have read James, which I believe is by Percy Everett, which is a retelling of Huckleberry Finn from the standpoint of Jim, otherwise known as James. It is incredible in terms of the language and the story. It really makes you look at a lot of things differently. I thought it was a marvelous book.
Does it have to be a book?
No, whatever. Stories are everything.
So I think what prompted me to want to write and to write stories, I remember the exact moment I was doing a movie in the Philippines. I was in a bathtub with a fake snake. The movie was called Dark Tide, don't rent it. And there was a guy in the back with a wire and the snake. I was supposed to be in the tub and not realize that a poisonous snake was slithering up my boobs, the 90s. And the snake kept getting stuck under my left boob, and the director said, "What's wrong with the snake?" And the guy in the back said, "It needs to be lubricated." And then the director said, "Then lubricate it." And then they presented me in the middle of a church in the Philippines with a giant vat of Vaseline and said, "Would you like to lubricate your own snake?" And I sat in the tub with 40 people watching me naked, and I lubed this fake snake so it would slither up my boobs, and I said, "I'm gonna fucking write comedy."
Yeah.
I can't follow that. But there's nothing I'm going to say that matters more than that. So I was going to say something that really motivated me decades ago to start thinking differently about films and about stories in general was when I saw the movie Rear Window. I'm sure that everyone's seen Rear Window. But it was the first time I've ever seen a story that had a single setting that had so many things happen within it that built such a powerful moment, series of moments for the character, and it redefined my understanding of what really creates a good story. So that was one of them.
Mine was going to be Terry Pratchett.
Oh,
Everything by text or type. Thank you all so much, and I really appreciate this was great. So thank you.